Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium on Thursday, April 9th, 2015. And, well, the Nefarium has been busy this week. And I've been going through emails trying to figure out what I was going to talk about. And several of you sent me this article from Zero Hedge, and I have to talk about this one, because one of you that sent me this article even gave your own speculation, which is pretty much in line with mine. So I'm going to doff my hat and thank Mr. GB for sharing his speculations about this one. Now, here's what the Zero Hedge article itself says. JP Morgan to use algorithms to predict which employees will go rogue. All right. Now, listen to the story. The story itself is really, really kind of interesting. It says Sally Dewar, head of regulatory affairs for Europe, who's overseeing the effort, in other words, we're already involved in the world of international financial trade, including whether workers skip compliance classes, violate personal trading rules, or breach market risk limits will be fed into the software. All right. It's very difficult, Ms. Dewar says, for a business head to take what could be hundreds of data points and start to draw any themes about a particular desk or trader, Dewar, 46, said last month in an interview. The idea is to refine those data points to help predict patterns of behavior. In other words, folks, JP Morgan is taking the step to police itself, kind of like the Securities and Exchange Commission is supposed to be doing. But now this is an internal matter with the banks. Expect many other banks to jump on this bandwagon. JP Morgan's surveillance program, this is Zero Hedge again, which is being tested in the trading business and will spread throughout global investment banking and asset management divisions by 2016, offers a glimpse into Wall Street's future. An industry reeling from billions of dollars in fines for the actions of employees who rigged markets, cheated clients, and aided criminals is turning to technology to police itself better. I bet you all feel so reassured at this. Failure to do so will provide ammunition for those pushing to separate trading operations from retail banks. The program was hinted at in a report published in December on the bank's website, How We Do Business. Well, we know how you do business, JP Morgan. Signed by CEO Jamie Dimon. It outlines the ways the firm is improving compliance, including starting a global communications surveillance program. How convenient for the bankers that, having created all the problems and none of them having gone to jail, they're now going to police themselves through a global surveillance program. Now, when I read this, you are probably already thinking exactly the same things that I'm thinking about banksters policing themselves. Pardon me. Now, one of the things that really caught my attention about this is where, and Mr. GB wrote this to me in his email, and we're thinking exactly the same thing. That tells me that a lot of us are thinking exactly the same thing about this story. First of all, where's the software coming from? Okay, who's developing the software? Now, I'll bet that if you scratch and sniff long enough, you're going to find some tendril or thread or tentacle leading back to the United States government, either through the Department of Justice, the Department of the Treasury, or even better, through one of the intelligence agencies. That's my bet. You're going to find personnel or people involved in all of that. And then secondly, Mr. GB in his email asked this question. He said, why the sudden inclination to do this after decades of rampant abuse? And why the need to predict bad human behavior? Or again, is that just the stated goal? And is it actually trying to predict someone else's behavior in the system? And folks, that's been my bet all along, because if you'll go back and remember some of the things I've blogged about, and we've talked about this, the ability to predict human behavior is always going to be a statistical model based on certain types of profiling and so on and so forth. So in other words, what this capability would do in the hands of a major prime bank like JP Morgan is it would give them the ability not just to model markets, but to predict behavior, and this in turn would be a powerful manipulation tool. In other words, if you think that the mortgage fraud that we saw with Fannie Mae and all of that, Sally Mae and all of that, Freddie Mac, during the bailout crisis and the period leading up to it was bad. Imagine now having the software in their hands to do even more. All right. So, in other words, folks, I'm taking exactly the opposite tack of Mr. Jamie Dimon. That this is not a move so much to regulate themselves and prove that they are above reproach and entirely trustworthy, and we should all rush to put our money in their banks and use their credit cards, because after all, they would never ever do anything like double billing or anything like that. If that's the case, imagine the fraud that could be perpetrated here. So in other words, what I'm suggesting, this is coming out of, once again, in my opinion, this is another step in putting into place in the public realm those aspects of that hidden system of finance I've been talking about for the last 3 to 4 years now, in terms of the getting of access loot and using that to create and set up this hidden system of finance. What I think this is suggesting to us is that they're moving this system slowly and surely, piece by piece, into the public realm. And that should give everybody pause, because that means that they are rather confident in their game. Now, there's another thing that I want you to take notice of in this story. And Mr. GB in his email pointed it out. And again, it's as if people are reading each other's minds now. All right. He said, if algorithmic trading has and makes periodic mistakes in the market, are any indications of what could happen should a program, through some miscalculation or short circuit, go rogue in the process of identifying human rogues? We suspect there's the potential for rather unfortunate outcomes. For instance, if one cannot trust machines to differentiate between a Tesla April Fool's joke and the real announcement of a new line of cars, we wonder how they'll be able to distinguish between humor and sarcasm, etc. In other words, exactly. How do you teach a program to do all that? And this is the bottom line here, folks. What JP Morgan is suggesting to us is that now that we have this magical program, all of our ethical concerns and considerations will be dispelled. But this is not the case, of course, because a program is only as good or bad as the programmers programming it, all right? And so again, we're back to square one. Who's coming up with these programs for them? What is their background? And like I say, I'll bet you dollars to donuts they have some connection to the U.S. government somewhere along the way, my bet being the Department of Justice, the Department of the Treasury, or one of the intelligence agencies. So Mr. JB ends his email, and again, I'm going to doff my hat to him. In the end, it's not really clear what all the fuss is about, because as Bloomberg reminds us, JP Morgan hasn't really been involved in too many questionable activities. About the only things that come to mind are fraudulent mortgage bond sales, the $6.2 billion London whale trading loss, services provided to Ponzi scheme operator Bernard Madoff, and the rigging of currency and energy markets. That's right, we can trust JP Morgan. Now, there's one final thing that a lot of you mentioned, and that's the possible relationship here to all of the banker deaths that we've been seeing lately. Because I have operated under the assumption that these deaths are related, that they are not accidental, that these people are being murdered because they have either discovered something or have had access to a secret that the banking community or the intelligence community or both, and my bet is both, does not want to leak out. So now imagine if you have a predictive algorithm that tells you someone, this group of traders or that group of traders or this individual or that individual is going to go missing. What this does is it automates your hit list. All right. So in other words, this isn't, as far as I'm concerned, once again, this isn't about appearing to be above board and have their operations completely ethical and so on. They've shown themselves to be criminals and unethical and immoral. So what this is about is protecting some secret, all right? And that's the reason I strongly suspect that what we're dealing with here is another intelligence community connection. And JP Morgan is becoming the public face of that. In other words, they're rolling that hidden system of finance more and more into the public eye. And that's a sign that maybe that hidden system has now finally completely taken over the public system. That may be the reason why, as I've suggested before, that may be the reason why we find our traditional allies, Germany, Britain, France, jumping on board the Chinese Asian Development Bank. Now, I'm not saying the Chinese are going to be any more or less corrupt than what we've seen Western bankers up to. My guess is in the immediate to midterm, they're going to be much less corrupt because they have to be. They've got to show their trustworthiness to other Western nations that they want involved in their bank. All right. So my guess is for the short term, they're a relatively safe bet. But my other guess is, as I've suggested, because it appears that they might be rolling out gradually, step by step, this hidden system of finance into the public eye, then my other point about Germany, the United Kingdom, both wanting to be founding members of this bank and therefore get seats on its board and have a permanent influence in the Chinese Asian Development Bank. This suggests to me that these nations themselves know about this hidden system of finance and they are tired of playing along with it. They've seen the corrupting influence. This is the first step away from it, and it's also the first step into exercising more control, more influence in the global financial picture. So in other words, if that hidden system of finance is true, that there is an intelligence injection and involvement in international banking, what these countries are saying is, we've had it with that. We're not playing along with that anymore. We've got to fix the system, and that's going to take a long time, all right? And that's what I think is going on here. So a huge story over at JP Morgan. What I'm really suggesting to you is that this story is a tip of a very, very large iceberg. So watch that one carefully, folks. We'll see you on the flip side, and God bless. Bye-bye.